freedom,
peace,
security,
equality. Words that anguishedly sought by the country, the Philippines.
Before attaining the progression of what the Philippines of today, it suffered and sacrificed the blood, sweat, and tears of many to earn its most desired movement, the freedom.
let us witness how the act of the Proclamation of Independence of the Filipino people, constructed by Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista, became one of the most influential documents that shaped the history of our beloved country, the Philippines.
Identifying the author's goals certainly help us in recognizing the approaches utilized to reach that goal. Every writer has a reason for writing, and it is necessary to grasp the writer's history, assumption, and objectives in order to fully know the truth and understand the past.
My name is Margaret Escapala, and I'll be discussing the author's background.
Hi, I am Christine Joy M. Rodriguez, and I am going to elaborate the reason of creation and the major contents and arguments. Hello everyone, I am Hannah Chekperdo, and I'm going to discuss the context of time.
As Filipinos, it is very crucial for us to see the various perspectives on the events and situations we are experiencing, including what happened in the past. I'm Alexandra Leonardo, and I'm going to share my constructive criticisms of the relevance and guiding power that the document possesses.
Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista, known simply as Don Bosyong. His parents Giovanni Enriquez Bautista and Silvestra Altamira gave him birth on December 7, 1830 in Binyan, Laguna. Bautista studied law at the University of Santo Tomas and got a degree. He pursued and mastered his legal career in Manila, where he was known for his advocacy of defending the poor and laborers for free. He was a member of La Liga Filipina, Cuerpo de Compromisarios, and La Propaganda, as well as contributing to their publications. However, in 1896, he was captured and imprisoned by the Spaniards in Fort Santiago on suspicion of involvement in the Philippine Revolution, although he was eventually released after defending himself. He served as President Emilio Aguinaldo's first advisor, and on June 12, 1898, he announced and wrote the Philippine Declaration of Independence, the unfurling of the first Philippine flag, and the playing of Marcha Filipina Magdalo, which later became the Philippine national anthem, the Lupang Hinirang. The event occurred and took place between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon at Aguinaldo's family home in Kawit, Cavite.
Tierra dorada, hija del sol de oriente, su fuego ardiente en ti latiendo está. Tierra de amores, del heroísmo cuna, los invasores no te olearán jamás. En tu azul cielo, en tus auras, en tus montes y en tu mar, esplende y late el poema de tu amada libertad. Tu pabellón que en las tines la victoria iluminó, no verán nunca apagados sus estrellas ni su sol. Tierra de dichas, de sol y amores, en tu regazo dulces vivir. Es una gloria para
The Philippines, a large island archipelago situated of Southeast Asia, was colonized by the Spanish in the latter part of the 16th century. Oppositions to Spanish rule began among Filipino priests who resented Spanish dominations of the Roman Catholic churches in the islands. In the late 19th century, Filipino intellectual and the middle class began calling for independence. In 1892, the Katipunan, a secret revolutionary society, was formed in Manila, the Philippine capital on the island of Luzon.
What was the main reason why the independence of the Filipino people was proclaimed? This analysis will focus on how the document reveals the reason behind the Philippine Revolution and how we were treated by the Spaniards, the kind of government established by Aguinaldo, explanation of our Philippine flag, and other more truths in history often overlooked and wrongly taught. Ambrosio Bautista began the declaration by saying the people of this country are already tired of bearing the ominous yoke of Spanish domination. This line alone already speaks volume about what it was like during the Spanish occupation. It reveals different issues felt in the Philippines, such as arbitrary arrests and the abuses of the civil guards, unjust deportations of illustrious Filipinos, unjust execution of Rizal, execution of Gumburza, abuses from the friars and their political dominance, Cavite Mutiny, and many more. The document Act of Proclamation of Independence of the Filipino people plays a big part in the development of Philippine history. It results in the country's aspiration of freedom from Spanish rule. The sacrifices made and the revolution that resulted from it results so much about the appearances from our past as it was written at the time where the country was at the hands of the Spanish colonizers. More than 4,000 Americans perished suppressing the Philippines, more than 10 times the number killed in the Spanish-American War. More than 20,000 Filipino insurgents were killed and an unknown number of civilians perished. When the revolution began with the Filipinos continuously oppressed by the Spaniards, they became rebels and planned to fight back in the general run of things. People were in pursuit of freedom for they were already tired of bearing oppression and Spanish domination over the Philippines. And that is the reason why it was necessary to declare the independence of the Philippines to inspire the people to fight more eagerly against the Spaniards. The Declaration of Independence would also lead foreign countries to recognize the independence of the country. With the government in operation, Aguinaldo thought that it was necessary to declare the independence of the Philippines. On June 12, between 4 and 5 in the afternoon, Aguinaldo, in the presence of a huge crowd, proclaimed the independence of the Philippines at Cavite el Viejo or Kawit, Cavite.
Nagsilagda sa lugar ito ay pinahayag natin ngayon at pinasisinayang sa pangalan ng buong Pilipinas ang ating karapatang makapanguhay ng malaya at nagsasarili, hiwalay at kalag na kalag sa kapangyarihan ng Espanya. At ngayon, hawak ko ng watawat na aking winabagayway sa harap nitong kapulungan at nanunumpa naman tayong lahat ng buong taimtim na ito'y mamahalin at ipagtatanggol hanggang sa kauli-uli ang patak ng ating dugo.
For the first time, the Philippine national flag, made in Hong Kong by Mrs. Marcela Agoncillo, assisted by Lorenza Agoncillo and Delfina Herbosa, was officially hoisted and the Philippine National March played in public. The Act of the Declaration of the Independence was prepared by Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista, who also read it. A passage in the Declaration reminds one of another passage in the American Declaration of Independence.
The Philippine Declaration was signed by 98 persons, among them an American Army officer who witnessed the proclamation. The Proclamation of Philippine Independence was, however, promulgated on August 1, when many towns has already been organized under the riles laid down by the dictatorial government. A dramatic feature of the ceremony was the formal unfurling of the Filipino flag amidst the cheer of the people. The document reveals the true meaning of our national flag, its colors and symbols, far from how we were taught to associate the colors red and blue as reflections of courage and peace. It reveals the white triangle in our flag signifies the distinctive emblem of the famous Society of the Katipunan, which by means of its blood compact inspired the masses to rise in revolution. Also, the three stars signify the three principal islands of this archipelago, Luzon, Mindanao, and Panay, where the revolutionary movement started, but as stated also in the proclamation, it was the Cebuanos, or Visayas, who first drove away the Spaniards, making it clear that they were not welcome in the country. Its 8th rays signifies the 8 provinces, Manila, Cavite, Bulacan, Pampanga, Nueva Ecija, Bataan, Laguna, and Batangas, which declared themselves in a state of war as soon as the first revolt was initiated. There are also 98 gentlemen mentioned were the ones present during the declaration, and they solemnly swear to recognize and defend the Filipino flag until their last drop of blood. The focus on independence rather than war is thus a reminder that great power conflict intersected with a much longer struggle for Philippine independence. The act of the Proclamation of Independence of the Filipino people proclaimed the sovereignty and independence of the Philippines from the colonial rule of Spanish Empire.
Every year, the country commemorates the anniversary of the Philippine independence proclaimed on June 12, 1898 in the province of Cavite. It is a very significant turning point in the history of the country because it signaled the end of the 333 years of the Spanish colonization. The declaration was a short 2,000-word document which summarized the reason behind the revolution against Spain, the war for independence, and the future of the new republic under Emilio Aguinaldo. As a student and part of the country, which is the Philippines, it is important to know the history of the proclamation of the independence in the Philippines because it will help us to analyze and be familiarized on what happened in that particular event and how the Filipino heroes fight for our freedom. To formally start, let me determine the context of time in the document. So where and when it was written? Actually, there is no exact date and information of where and when it was written, but according to some historians, it is created between May and June 1898. Consequently, it was presented and proclaimed on June 12, 1898 between 4 and 5 in the afternoon in Cavite at the ancestral home of Emilio Aguinaldo. So what event occurred at that time? In December 1897, a truce known as the Pact of Biak na Bato was declared between the two forces with Filipino leaders led by General Emilio Aguinaldo, agreeing to be exiled to Hong Kong while the Spaniards paid an indemnity for the damages caused as a result of the conflict. The renewed conflict would have been disastrous for the Filipinos if not for the deteriorating diplomatic relation between Spain and the United States over another revolution in Cuba. This eventually led to the Spanish-American War in 1898 and the arrival of a new colonizer to the Philippines, the Americans. Even before the battle in Manila in 1898, Aguinaldo had already been meeting Americans in Singapore. He talked with Consul E. Spencer Pratt regarding U.S.-Filipino collaboration against the Spaniards before he went back to Hong Kong to meet up with Commodore George Dewey, the commander of the Asiatic Fleet. Aguinaldo remained in Hong Kong and met with the American Consul General Roncesvalles Wildman. He paid Wildman a total of 117,000 pesos to purchase his rifles and ammunition. A first shipment worth of 50,000 was made, but the other half was never delivered. Wildman never returned of the given to him. On May 19, 1898, Aguinaldo finally returned to the Philippines on board the U.S. cruiser McCulloch. Aguinaldo conferred with Dewey on the Philippine condition and was supplied with arms captured from the Spaniards. Earlier, on May 24, Aguinaldo announced the creation of the dictatorial government. The formation of this type of the rule was a necessity when the growing nation needed a strong leader. He was emphasized that the dictatorship was only temporary, as would be a prelude to the establishment of the republic form government. On May 28, the Filipino forces won their first victory in Alapan, Imus. The newly made Filipino flag was hoisted in Alapan, the latter unfurled at the Teatro Caviteño in Cavite Nuevo, in front of the Filipinos and captured Spanish soldiers. A group of American officers and soldiers witnessed the ceremony. On June 12, 1898, Aguinaldo declared Philippine independence from Spanish rule at a ceremony in his house at Kawit, Cavite. And Ambrosio Rian-Bardis Bautista is the one who read the declaration that was later signed by 98 persons. So after a long suffering from the Spanish government, and the friars' mistreatment and the sacrifices and the loss of brave countrymen like Dr. Jose Rizal and the 3 Filipino priests known as the Gumbursa, the revolutionaries sought to reclaim their country for their people. The Philippine national anthem, then known as the Marcha Nacional Filipina, composed by Julian Felipe, was played by the Banda de San Francisco de Malabon, and the Philippine flag was again flourished.
The source is capable of serving as a strong foundation for the historians and students to interpret and analyze the complexities of the past because, first, Ambrosio Bautista himself was a credible author and lawyer who witnessed the Philippine Revolution. He glimpsed and experienced the cruelty of the Spaniards. He was there and he saw significant events which made him create a primary source for the future Filipinos to be their guide in looking back at the past. Second, Bautista provided reliable sources to support his claims, which made it add value in making his document well criticized and well supported, not just depending on his point of view. Third, the document is relevant because it was a significant advance in forming the Filipino identity. It was the very first and most convincing sign of the battle for independence that the Filipino people had been waging. It presented data for modern Filipinos, allowing them to further appreciate and comprehend the hardships and inequities that our forefathers endured in order for us to enjoy the freedom we have today. Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista made significant contributions to Philippine history. He was a fervent patriot who served his country throughout wartime and protected its citizens until his tragic death. And let us internalize the last part, the guiding power. The document sheds light on the manner in which the Spaniards dealt with early Filipinos. It also provides information on the battle for seeking independence, and it shows what kind of administration Aguinaldo established when we Filipinos gained our freedom from the hands of the Spaniards. The document and proclamation of the independence of the Philippines served as the turning point for Filipinos. It symbolized unity, bravery, and desire to fight for freedom under the Spaniards' occupation. This series of recorded events undoubtedly hold a power that guides us Filipinos in analyzing the past, making us not to be doomed from it. Today, we become wiser. We are able to construct criticism. We become more aware of how the government should treat us to experience the proper democratic governance. Because at the end of the day, we are Filipinos, caring for our beloved country.
Why is it necessary to commemorate Philippine Independence Day? It is significant since it celebrates the assertion of Filipino people's intrinsic and undeniable sovereignty to independence and freedom. Furthermore, to remember and respect what our forefathers and patriots sacrificed to free the country from dictatorship, injustice, and colonialism.
We are
We are
We are the Group 3.